The following story is read by the author. You know somebody that takes and never returns, don't you? Of course you do. It is only human nature to take more than you want to give back. Take the fellows in our next story, for example. One is willing to do anything to please, while the other is more than willing to take. But just who is playing who in this fable I call The King and the Vagabond, by Sean Parker. There was once a king who ruled over a quaint kingdom. He was not the worst king to ever exist, nor was he the best. Though if this king had a fault, as often as people in leadership do, it was his great haughtiness. The king simply believed that he was the best ruler that was, is, or ever will be. One day, a wandering vagabond was caught loitering in the village, and thus was brought before the king by the guards. By the king's own decree, homeless wanderers such as this were to be driven out of the kingdom to louse elsewhere. Once in the throne room, the vagabond threw himself before the proud king, groveling at his feet. He beseeched the king, saying, "Have mercy on me, my lord, and allow me a place to live. If you do this thing for me, I will praise your name to the villagers every day so that they will be forever reminded of your greatness." These words had a great influence on the king, and he immediately ordered his servants to prepare a home for the vagabond. Then the king warned the man, saying, "This thing I will do for you, but be mindful that if you do not do as you promised every day, I will have your head on the chopping block." In which the vagabond replied, "I am a man of honor. I shall keep my promise." The next day the king was told by his servants that the vagabond was seen chanting his praise for the king. They told the king that the vagabond spoke high and low of the king's glory until there was not a single soul in the whole village that had not heard the vagabond's worship of the king. This pleased the king greatly, but he was still skeptical of the vagabond. Surely this vagrant, this gutter snipe, would not keep his word forever, the king reasoned.
"Thus, once the vagabond drops his promise, I will keep my own promise and have him beheaded,"
the king said to himself. The king thus ordered his servants to watch the vagabond every day in expectation of him breaking his oath. Yet every day the vagabond kept his word and sang the praises of the king, much to the king's delight. Weeks passed by, and the vagabond continued to keep his vow, until one day the guards brought the vagabond before him, once again bound in chains.
"What's this?" the king asked. "Has this vagabond finally broken his vow?"
"Nay, my lord," said one of the guardsmen. "He sang your praise for over an hour today, but he was later found begging for food on a street corner. A crime by your own decree, sire."
The king grimaced to hear these things.
"What do you have to say in your defense?"
he asked the vagabond. The vagabond fell to his knees and humbled himself before the king, saying,
"Please, your lord, have mercy on me, and see in all of your glory and greatness that I am hungry and need food. If only you will give me 3 meals a day, can I be content. In return for your generosity, I will be your court jester, to sing and dance and play whenever you desire entertainment."
The king pondered this a moment, then said,
"How could a feculent lowlife like yourself entertain me?"
With that said, the vagabond slipped out of his chains, much to the guard's shock, and casually threw them to the floor. Then he tumbled and rolled. He juggled many great objects, such as swords and bowls, and told many a great jokes, until the king was roaring with approval.
"Very well,"
the king said as he wiped a tear from his eye.
"I will do this thing you ask, but be warned, if you refuse me a performance, even once, it is off to the chopping block with you."
In which the vagabond replied,
"I am a man of honor, my lord. I shall keep my promise.
Thus, from that day forward, whenever the king threw a party or had guest over, he would summon the royal jester. The vagabond turned jester would then sing and tumble and get the crowds to roll with laughter. No one in the kingdom had ever seen such a spectacle. Sometimes, however, when the king was in a foul mood, he would summon the jester and have him do humiliating jokes at his own expense, and make him tumble and fall in most painful ways. Despite this, the vagabond never lost his humor, despite the humiliation the king put him through, for he was healthy and well fed. More weeks passed, and the vagabond continued to both praise the king daily and also perform as court jester. One day the vagabond was once again brought before the king by the guards, though this time he was not bound.
"What is this?"
the king asked.
A complaint was launched against this man by the village tailor,
The guardsman said.
The tailor told us that the vagabond kept begging for fine clothes, sire.
Before the king could respond, the vagabond bowed his head deeply until his hair almost touched the stone floor.
My lord, your greatness is an example to us all, but as your court jester, I am not worthy to stand before you in these filthy rags. Give me a wardrobe of fine clothes, so that I may look worthy to stand before you. If you do these things, I will sculpt a great statue in your likeness to place throughout the village as a testament to your wide and noble rule. For you see, sire, I am also a skilled artisan. This work I will do for you twice a month until the day I die.
The king smiled at his favored servants. Already he had proven to be a great jester, so the king had no doubts in the vagabond's aptitude for sculpting.
"Very well," the king said. "I will order the tailor to make whatever fine clothes you desire. But mind you, if you do not keep your oath, I will have you sentenced to the chopping block."
At this the vagabond said,
I am a man of honor, my lord. I will keep my promise.
With that said, he bowed once again and left the king's throne room. Thus the vagabond made a brilliant statue in the king's likeness, the first of which the king had placed in the town square. The vagabond continued his other promises as well. He continued to sing the king's praises every day and would perform as the court jester at the king's every whim. Now, however, the vagabond was clean, healthy, and well dressed. So well dressed, in fact, that the vagabond was almost impossible to distinguish from the nobles of the land. Another week passed while the king was enjoying the vagabond's labors, when his favorite servant was once again brought before him. The two guards who accompanied the vagabond turned sculptor each stood a respectable distance.
"What have you done now?"
the king asked, exasperated, in which the vagabond replied,
Nothing, your excellency. I come of my own free will to ask of you a favor. You see, I am wishing to better my lot in life, but I have not the resources to do so. I wish for only a small plot of land and a handful of slaves, so that I may cultivate the land and grow fruits and vegetables for the benefits of your most glorious kingdom. I understand I am asking a lot of you, my grace, so in return I will give to you half of the crop I produce and half of the profit I make. I shall pay you this tithing forevermore, as a tribute to your majestic magnificence.
The king tried to speak, but was cut off by the vagabond, who continued, saying,
I also understand that if I fail to keep my promise, you will have me beheaded at the chopping block. As I have said before, so do I say again. I am a man of honor, my lord. I will keep my promise.
Needless to say, the king was flabbergasted at the vagabond's offer. Had it been any other peasants who had made such a plea, the king would have angrily turned them away for being so pretentious. However, in the vagabond's past, he had proven that his word was law, so what else could the king say at such a proposal other than,
"I accept,"
he said. Thus it came to pass that the vagabond attained his land and slaves, and he grew plentiful fruits and vegetables for the kingdom. The vagabond turned farmer, kept his word, and paid the king half of everything he had earned. The vagabond used the other half of the earned profits to buy more land and even some livestock. His farm became so successful, in fact, that within a year the vagabond had become the richest man in the land, second only to the king, of course. The vagabond also kept his other oaths as well. Every day he would sing the king's praises, perform as court jester whenever he was summoned by the king, and twice a month there would be another monument to feed the king's ego, placed throughout the land. The vagabond became much different than when he first wandered into town. He was now well fed and dressed in the nicest of clothes, and had an aura of supreme confidence that made him the most popular man in the kingdom. Oh, besides the king, of course. In fact, nobody could distinguish the vagabond from the dirty beggar that had wandered into the town less than a year before. So time slipped by, and the king grew fat on the spoils of his favorite servant. One day, while he was admiring his piles of gold littered about the throne room, the vagabond casually walked in. The two guardsmen that accompanied the vagabond were keeping behind him with their heads humbly lowered. The king was overjoyed to see the man who had brought such prosperity to his kingdom, that he failed to notice the menacing glints in the eye of the vagabond turned noble.
"My friend," the king said, "what brings you here this day?"
The vagabond lowered his head. His reply was soft and hardly heard.
"May I speak with you alone, my lord?"
he asked. The king immediately did as he was asked, and ordered the guards to leave. Once the throne room was empty, save for the two of them, the vagabond fell to his knees and almost cried as he spoke.
My master, I have been blessed so much by your divine generosity. You have enriched my life in ways I had never before dreamed possible, and I thank you for that. However, what I ask you now is great, and I pray that you will hear me out before you make a decision. You understand, I have lived my life always in poverty, but now I have money, power, and fame.
"Go on,"
the king said.
But there is one thing I have always dreamed of, and that is being a king, if just for one day. If you grant me this wish of being king for a day, I will return your kingdom to you and more. I will give you all of my wealth, land, and slaves, while continuing to perform my other duties. I will still sing your praise. I shall perform as your court gesture, and I will sculpt great statues in your image. I will be giving you my entire being for just one day of living my dream. What say you, my lord?"
The king sat silently in his throne. He could see the sadness in the vagabond's eyes. Then finally the king responded,
"You, who have praised my name, you, who have entertained me, you, who has made great works in my image, and you, who has given unto me half of all of your wealth. You have done more for me than my entire kingdom has. I will give you this day, for I know that you are a man of honor, and you will keep your promise."
Thus, the next day the king made all the proper arrangements to declare the vagabond king. He wrote out all the documents promising to transfer his power to the man. For the kingship ceremony, the entire kingdom showed up to see the crowning of the new king. Though many people in the kingdom were confused as to why the current king was relinquishing his throne, none were opposed to it. For you see, by now many more favored the vagabond over the current king, and welcomed the change in leadership. The king kept quiet about the deal that was made, for he knew that after the day was up, his loyal servants would give back his crown and all his wealth over to him. In the great throne room, the king slowly removed his crown and gave it to the crown bearer. The bearer, in turn, walked over to the vagabond and slowly lowered it onto his head. Once the crown was firmly on the vagabond's head, and the contract fulfilled, did his demeanor begin to change. The vagabond's normally humbled features faded into an arrogant sneer. Then the former king felt his heart sink into terror as the new king issued out his first decree.
By order of the new king,
The vagabond turned king yelled,
the old king is to be taken to the chopping block and beheaded.
The former king could only tremble, as what was only moments ago his own guardsmen bind him and begin to carry him towards the doors and the horrible blood-covered chopping block beyond. Despite him being a former king, the current king's word was law. However, before the old king could be carried out of the door, he screamed out to the former vagabond.
I don't understand,
The former king cried.
When you promised me your praise, you carried through. When you said you would be my gesture, you kept your oath. When you promised to make statues of me, you did as you vowed. When you swore half your profits from the farm I gave you, you did as you said. Why do you betray me now? I thought you were a man of honor. I thought you kept your promise.
The terrified former king cried out in fear.
Of course you did,
The new king said in a sarcastic tone as the old king was dragged out the door to the bloody chopping block beyond.
because that is the way I programmed you to believe.
The end. 3/23/2010. Sean Parker Storytelling.